Welcome to the future.
What's up, guys? Mike Garrick here with more Warrior 5, the top 5% of people who think, eat, and move with a purpose. It's Monday night, and we're back here at DC Skills and Fitness. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Big 7. The Big 7 is the foundation of movements we should be building our workouts around. These are brutal compound lifts. They're going to build strength and muscle, but we should be always working on perfecting our form so we can keep our performance high and our injuries low. Now, number one, we're going to be talking about the plank. Now, I know the plank is not a compound movement, but I put it number one because it's an extension of the bracing sequence, and I feel like the bracing sequence is the most important thing you could possibly learn physically because everything else builds on top of that. You can check out my other video where I talk about how to do the bracing sequence. But ultimately, what you're doing is you're learning how to stabilize your core, basically from the neck to mid-thigh. So here's how you do it. Get into this basic push-up position, and ultimately what you want to do is you want to make sure that your hands are straight out in front of you and they're stacked above your shoulders. You don't want to be out wide or too narrow. You want it to be stacked directly below your shoulder joint. So you get into position like so, and that's all there is to it. You hold yourself straight. Now you can go for time, you can put weight on your back, you can do all kinds of things. But ultimately, you want to keep nice and straight. What happens if you disengage your core is this. This is what you're going to see. You're going to see people go into what's called overextension of the lower back, and ultimately you can start feeling that in your lower back. So grip the butt, keep it nice and straight like so. And you also want to make sure that your feet are together like this. You don't want to be out here. When your feet are together like this, you can grip your glutes and protect your spine more efficiently. And that's all there is to it. Number two, the squat. The squat is like the foundational movement a human can do. But there's all kinds of tiny little things that can go wrong. So let's talk about it. Ultimately, what you're doing is you're flexing at the knee and you're flexing at the hip joint, right? And you're flexing at the ankles. So this is what it looks like. But here's the issue. As you're going down, you've got to be careful that your knees don't collapse inwards. You've got to be careful that your toes are pointed between 0 and 12 degrees. If your feet are pointed too far out, then your knees had a tendency to collapse inwards. So you take a stance, keep your feet relatively straight or just barely turned out, and you start to break at the hips first, and then you break at the knees next. Like so. That is a body weight squat. Now, whether you're squatting with body weight or you're squatting with weight on your back, it's basically the same. It doesn't really matter. But as you start squatting with weight on your back, it gets progressively more and more difficult. So you need to make sure that you can do it with body weight first. So just make sure that your knees, your shins are relatively straight. What I mean by that is that your shin stays relatively perpendicular to the floor. It doesn't move very much. So if you'll notice, what happens is my hips move back, like so. You don't want your knees to be moving too much, especially as they're tracking towards the toes. Also extremely important is to keep your torso nice and rigid and straight. You don't want to be an overextension of the cervical spine or overextension of the lower back. You don't want to be doing your squats like this. See the difference? Very overextended here, very overextended here. Here's the difference. Spine straight and neutral. Next is the deadlift, the second, or some people consider the first most important move. So the deadlift is basically a squat, except for the weight is on the floor instead of on your back. So it's the same thing. You break at the hips, break at the knees, come down and pick something up, and then you do the reverse. So you come pulling up, extend, just like that. Break, break, down. Break, break, and then reverse. Break, break, reverse. And when you're holding a bar in your hand, you want that bar to slide right up your knees. you want to make sure that that bar is right in the midline of your feet. If you're not holding a bar, if you're just doing body weight, you still want to practice for that. Break, 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 break. Notice how my core is the exact same as the squats, nice and flat. I'm not rounding my back, I'm not bending over like this, right? My knees aren't going forward, heels aren't coming up, feet aren't turned out, they're relatively straight. Break, 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 break. That's a deadlift. Okay, next is a pull-up. So the way I learned how to rebuild my pull-up is to make sure when you're pulling down in the scapular plane. It's the same plane that you want to press in, which is about on a 45-degree angle here. So when you're doing a pull-up, if you're doing pull-ups like this is really hard on the shoulders. So if you do pull-ups like this, where you're actually pulling down like this, you're actually pulling like this, like a lat pull, then your shoulder has room to clear that joint. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So when you take your hands up, basically shoulder width apart, and you just pull up. See how I just arrive above the bar? None of this trying to reach up with my chin, and then I go back down. Just like that. See how I'm in this full hang position? This is important for your mid and lower traps. Notice also how my foot position is out in front of me. I don't have my feet back like this with a really arched back. That's not good positioning for your spine. This is the position you want to be in. You can grip your glutes, keep your spine straight. See the travel of my arms like this. And ultimately, let me show you it from a side view. Let's see. You can see the angle of my feet like this. Like that. Number 5, barbell row. So ultimately, like we talk about the deadlift, when you walk up to the bar, you're basically you have to deadlift this up into position first. This is why this exercise is so effective, is because you actually have to kind of hold yourself in a half deadlift while you're rowing it up. Now you can row it up in a hands over grip or a hands under grip or a supinated grip. This grip is the strongest grip naturally, other than the neutral grip. So this one's a little bit more natural. Doesn't really matter, whatever's most comfortable for you. And this is what it looks like. So I'm going to show you a deadlift. I have to deadlift this up just to get it into position to row it. So here I am, right, this position. Notice I'm nice and straight. I'm going to break at the hips, like so, and I'm going to row it up. Row it up. Row it up. Notice how my back is nice and straight, and it actually has to support this. Now, whether you're doing it with a barbell or you're doing it with a dumbbell and you're bracing yourself and you're doing it one-armed, it's still the same. You're rowing your arm back. Now you can also do it seated in a cable position, either way. But the barbell is the king because you have to support yourself in that broken position right here and row it up. That's why it's such an awesome exercise. Number 6, the bench press. So the bench press, or the pressing movement, is very similar to the push-up, which I'm going to show you how to do next. But ultimately, it's extremely important to learn how to do this to actually protect your shoulders, or you can destroy your shoulders really easily. So the pushing motion, the pressing motion, is to get your shoulder blades back, to pinch them back, and to keep them back and down, actually, to keep them in that position. So everything happens right in that shoulder position like this. And your forearms are basically going to stay perpendicular to the floor, if that makes sense. They're going to stay straight up and down. They're not going to move this way or this way. They're going to stay straight up and down. So let me demonstrate. You want to act like you're breaking the bar. You want to try to break the bar. Look what happens to my elbows when I do that. I'm trying to externally rotate, or I'm trying to break the bar. And what that does is that stabilizes and sets my shoulder in place, protects it when I go down. And then you just lower down. Notice where I come. Right here. It's basically to sternum. Notice that my elbows are about 30 to 40 degrees. You don't want your elbows turning out like this. This is very hard on your shoulders, and will eventually lead to shoulder impingement and problems. So you're here, you come down, you push up. You also want to notice where my wrists are. You don't want your wrists to be bent back like this or to be too far forward. You want them to be straight in line with your forearms. So it's like this. Okay, the push-up is the cousin to the bench press, and it's basically the same thing. You want to keep your forearms perpendicular to the ground, and you're basically in a plank position, like so, and then all you have to do is lever over your hands. It's that easy. Like so. Same thing. Arms are about a 45-degree angle to the body. Keep your forearms perpendicular, hands pointing forward. Make sure your shoulders don't dump forward. Number 7, overhead press. So overhead press is extremely important to get right, because if you don't get right, you can really hurt your shoulders. So first thing you want to do is you want to make sure you can actually get your arms overhead in a position that's safe. So if you can keep your spine straight, if you can get your arm up to where it actually bisects your ears, then you can actually get into a safe position. So knowing that, that's the position that you're going to push up. You're going to be pushing or pulling in the scapular plane. So you keep your elbows close to the body and you push it overhead like so. So I'm going to show you, de-rack it here like this. This is what it looks like. You push it up in a nice straight line. I had my hat on, so I had to kind of accentuate. But ultimately, you barely move your head out of the way, and then as you're going up, you lock into place and you're in a straight line. Pretty easy. Hope you guys enjoyed tonight, the Big 7. Keep working on mastering the Big 7 to build a lean, powerful body. Don't forget to like, subscribe. I'm Mike Garrick, helping you think, eat, and move with a purpose.
Welcome to the future.